day. We did get some rain last night, and supposed to get some more today. Don't see Nancy. It's a bad weekend for Gwen and Mike and Nancy and Betty um, and me. Glendon Jackson, who I met for the first time on Easter Sunday in 1948 at Glendale Church of Christ. Uh, we'd moved there the day before, and we have been friends for 70 years. We dated twin sisters, I think, and the third set of twins we dated, we married. And both couples got married in 1960, and so we've been married to those twin girls for 58 years. And Glendon passed away Thursday night about 7:15. So today, that day was a sad day. Today is too. But anyway, keep Nancy Jackson and Gwen Patrick in your prayers. They're outstanding people. Gwen's one of the sweetest young'uns I think I've ever known, and her daughter, Leslie Johnson, goes to church here too. And the thing I remember about Leslie is every time she woke up, it was with a smile and hi, when she was little. And she still has that same personality, happy and good friend. So anyway, keep them in your prayers. And today the funeral is at 3 at Glendale. And anyway, would you bow with me, please? Father, we thank you for this day and for all your many blessings. We thank you for your strength and courage that you give to us in times of need. And Father, we'd ask you to be with us today. Father, we'd ask you to look on us and forgive anything that's wrong in our lives so that we can stand pure and clean before you today as we study your word and we worship you. Father, we'd ask you to be with those that are ill. Bob Handback, I understand, has pneumonia. He's at his son's house. And Father, we would ask you to be with him, be with the rest of the folks that are sick, and be with them and return them back to their normal walk. Father, we'd ask you to guide and guard and keep us for you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. We're in the book of Exodus. We skipped last Sunday because we had the social media lessons, 3 of them, which I really enjoyed. And I was talking to him after Sunday evening service, and I said something about I'm not on Facebook, Twitter, or any of that stuff. And he said, what kind of phone do you have? And I showed him my little old flip phone. He says, you ought to donate that thing to Pope Tavern for their museum. And I said, thank you. I said, but if you call me, I will talk to you. And that's the same thing I tell my granddaughters. Okay. The granddaughters fuss at me all the time because I don't have a smartphone. And I said, I don't like things that's smarter than I am. Don't mind people smarter than I am. I just don't like things that are. And so anyway, but last Sunday was a good Sunday. It informed us and our children of some things to look out for. And I've maintained that all along. I do not keep any financial stuff on the computer at home because I'm on the internet. And I do all that by pencil. And the only thing I order with a credit card online is airplane tickets. And I did order a taillight from a pickup truck. I'll take that back. So I've been on there ordering something with a credit card twice this year. I hope that's the end of that. Anyway, we're in the book of Exodus, and we're looking at a transition time. I call it a transition. Maybe I'm wrong, but I call it a transition time. We're transitioning, or God is transitioning the children of Israel and most of the world at that point. He's transitioning from patriarchal age to a nation age and to a formal written down instructions in government and how to live and all of those things. Prior to this time, and even in the early part of Moses' life, they were in the patriarchal age. And, Moses was 40 years old when he leaves Egypt. And that was somewhere around 1490 BC. And he goes to Midian, and he stays there for 40 years, and God appears to him. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But he's 80 years old when God appears to him in the land of Midian, or over by Mount Horeb, and it gives him some instruction about going back to Egypt and what to do. In 2 years, I'll be 80, and I don't want to have to lead 2.5 million people anywhere, much less through the desert, And if you look at the task laid on this 80-year-old man, it's a monumental task. And the other thing we have to keep in mind is that during the next 40 years, somehow, somewhere out in that desert, because they never made it to Canaan's land and they were still living in tents, he writes the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Well, how did he get that? Well, all of those stories about the creation, about Adam and Eve, and about Noah, and about Abraham, and about all of that, and the flood, is handed down from generation to generation. Yes, God did help him with that, didn't he? Sent his Spirit to help him write the Pentateuch like God wants it. And he does that between the age of 80 and 120 when he dies. And I don't have all the answers about the patriarchal age, just to be truthful about it. Number one, priest. What do you know about priests during the patriarchal age? We don't see that many of them, do we? I guess the first encounter of a priest turns out to be who? Melchizedek. And what do we know about Melchizedek? We don't know when he was born, and we don't know when he dies. But he's a priest king. He's the king of Salem and God, a godly priest. Where did they get that title? Who gave it to him? God had to do that. And he talked to the patriarchs. He talked to the heads of families and gave them instruction. How long a period of time goes between, look at Abraham. He tells Abraham when Abraham is 75 years old, he says, you're going to have a son. When does he deliver? When he's 100, right? 25 years. And in the interim, Abraham and Sarah decide they're going to help God with that because it's getting old, right? They are getting old. Sarah's 90 when Isaac's born. Abraham's 100. I was holding a baby just a few minutes ago. And Betty and I don't need any babies. Okay? Not now. But we had 2, and we love them to death. We really do. It's hard to believe that they're in their mid and late 50s. But they are. So how does one become a priest? There's more than just Melchizedek, but God inspires Paul to write about Melchizedek, and Melchizedek and Jesus are compared, aren't they? King Jesus, priest Jesus, high priest Jesus. And Abraham pays tithes to Melchizedek. He's coming back from the battle of the kings where he defeats them and rescues Lot and his belongings and all of that. And he runs into Melchizedek, and Melchizedek has gives him what? Bread and wine. Bread and wine. What does that remind you of? Yeah. Reminds you of Christ. Say, remember me. Remember me. Then there's others that are talked about being priests, and Jethro and Ruel. Exodus 2:16 and 18. Ruel, who is the father, I think, of Jethro, and the father-in-law of Moses, is talked about being a priest in Midian. We don't have any clue to what he does, do we? Not a clue. What he does as a priest for those in his family or in that country of Midian. Jethro, his son, is talked about being, I think he's his son, talked about being a priest. So that passed down to him. How does that lineage work? I don't know. But they are priests in Midian and a priest of God in Midian, or it wouldn't talk about them being a priest. When we look at other part that is recorded for us in the Genesis narrative that Moses writes, we see the promise. The promise to Abraham is, I'm going to make you a great nation, and I'm going to bless the world through your seed, and your seed you ain't going to be able to count, because there'll be more of them than there is of the sands on the shore of the sea. And that's true. That promise comes true, doesn't it? And he carries that promise from Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the 12 tribes, all the way through the history of Israel, or Israel, ever how you want to pronounce it, carries that promise through. And we see that recorded for us, and we watch it start transforming into a nation in the book of Exodus. We do know some things about what those men did in those days as patriarchs. They offered sacrifice. First sacrifice we hear about is who? Cain and Abel. And where'd they get that idea? Well, it had to come from Adam, their father, who had to have been told by God, you will do this and sacrifice to me. And what was it? It was an animal sacrifice. And that is carried on all the way up to Christ. That's carried on from the time of Adam all through down to Noah and the flood, and from Noah and his 3 sons all the way to Christ. They sacrificed animals just like God told them to do. They burned the fat. The priest ate the meat. And that sacrifice went on all the time. It's estimated, or I estimated, but reading through, and maybe I'm wrong about this, that there were some 850 on special days and weekends and Sabbaths that were offered to God by the priest at the tabernacle and at the temple after it was built in a year's time. That doesn't include the ones that are brought in by the people for their sin, for their sacrifice that the priest did for them. And so what were they doing? They were sacrificing to God like he told them to do. And Abel and Cain had a problem, didn't they? Cain kills his brother. And his blood cries to God from the ground. And Cain says, am I my brother's keeper? And he let him know, for surely you are your brother's keeper. And so those things are in the Old Testament. And, Abraham sacrifices in 12:7 and several times, but there's one. Genesis 8:20, it's Noah. So anyway. And remember, at that point in time, when we see Moses in Midian and getting ready to come back to Egypt, there is no tabernacle. Hadn't happened yet, has it? There is no central place where Israel goes to worship God. It's patriarchal age, and they do it individual family, individual person. And so there's no Ten Commandments at that point. Oh, but I'm sure, we got the example of Cain. You don't kill your brother. You don't kill people. Life is precious. And so you don't spill human blood. And anyway, so that brings us just a broad brush of the lead up. But anyway, chapter 3 of Exodus says, now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. He came to what? The mountain of God. It's in the desert. It's in evidently the area of Midian. And Moses takes that flock to the backside, it says. So the backside, if you're going that way, I would think it would be to the side towards the Red Sea. Maybe I'm wrong when he talks about the backside. Because the country, if you look on the map, is sort of narrow. It's about narrow just like Israel is or was, and it still is. So when he's talking about going to the backside, I would think he's gone to the Red Sea side, away from where Jethro's house is. And he goes to Horeb. The angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. Bush was not. Why wasn't it consumed? Because God's in the midst of it, right? And I think there's a major, major lesson there, and maybe I'm wrong. Remember, 2 Sundays ago, Adam had a lesson, a sermon based on almost extinct Israel because of Ahab, and Jezebel. That all of Israel is worshiping according to Elijah says, I'm the only one left, God. It's just me. And God says, no, I've got 7,000. Well, if you think about just 7,000 left out of the 12 tribes at that point, the 10 tribes are split off after Solomon. And the 2 tribes that are down south, Judah and Benjamin, all of them are worshiping Baal. And he says, God says, I have 7,000 that have not bowed to Baal. So you're not alone. But if you think about how many people that ought to be in the 10 or in the 12 tribes, and there's only 7,000 left that, hello? Only 7,000 left. Well, how's that look today? How's that look today? How many people that claim to be Christian, and I'm talking about broad brush Christian, in this world? How many people in the world today? Somewhere around 8 billion, 8 billion. And there's 1.6 that claim some kind of Christianity, 1.2 or claim some kind of Islam. And the rest of the world is either, nothing or what. So what, if 7,000 was 1/8, there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 56,000. I think there were a whole lot more than that because 2.5 million come out of Egypt. And anyway, there we are, and there they are. Yes, sir. Yeah. But God won't be there. The difference between that burning bush and hell is God is in that, keeping that bush from being consumed. And he kept Israel from being consumed. How many troops were killed of the Syrian that came to capture Jerusalem? They were outside the gate. How many? 185, that's right. 185,000 soldiers were killed overnight. Not by anybody in Israel that had a weapon and went out to do it. They were killed by God. And so he kept Jerusalem, he says, that's my city. He kept Jerusalem from being captured and forever under somebody else's rule at that point in time. Kept them from being consumed. Kept them from being consumed. And if you look and read through Samuel, the Kings, Chronicles, and then through the prophets and see what every prophet writes in the Old Testament, be he major or minor, and the only difference in major and minor is the volume of writing done. But every one of them, what's the begging thing they do to the people? Turn back to God and see how much he can bless you. Wow. Israel was, how would we say that, pressured but not consumed. Why? One reason. One reason and one reason only. He let 10 tribes be taken off into captivity, never to be seen again or heard of again. Oh, there's still Jews out there that were in those 10 tribes, but they can't trace their ancestry. They can't trace anything. It was wiped out in 721 BC. All 10 of those tribes in northern Israel were done away with. To ever be lost as far as records are concerned from human race, keeping up with who they are. And why was that? Remember what Adam said 2 Sundays ago? They turned from God and says, you don't worship here. That was the question that the Samaritan woman had for Christ, wasn't it? She said to him, you say that we're supposed to worship in Jerusalem. Our folks say we're supposed to worship here in Mount Gerizim. What? Where are we supposed to do that? He says, a day is coming when you don't worship either place. You can worship where you are. And we're in that worship where you are, aren't we? What a blessing. But Israel was pressed all of the time and taken over by country after country after country. So we get to the Romans, and here comes the Christ. Here comes the Christ. What happened to him? Nailed to a cross. I can't imagine a much more heinous death than that. Oh, there's folks that have been killed all throughout it. Did him in Vietnam. If they caught you, if they didn't take you up to North Vietnam and put you in the prison where McCain was, they might string you up and skin you. Today, the followers of Muhammad just cut your head off. But in Christ's time, that was the Roman way to put to death a bad criminal, was to crucify. One of the accounts I've read about little city of Emmaus, which was about 7 miles from Jerusalem, going basically northwest from Jerusalem. When the Romans came through there, they crucified 3,000 of the citizens in that little town. And the only reason they didn't do everybody was they ran out of crosses. It's been a theory of mine all of my life, I guess, is the thing that the person doesn't want to happen to him, he'll do to somebody else. The thing that he's most afraid of, he'll put you through. And that's the way I see the Roman in that day, is they put him on a cross because that was what they were most afraid of. Yes, sir. Yeah. Well, if we look at the Assyrian, when he came, he captured the 10 tribes, right, in 721. And they disappeared from the face of the earth. And they did all kinds of bad stuff. When Babylon came, for Judah and Benjamin, they took them into captivity. They took what did they do to the king? They blinded him, right? Yeah. They blinded him and took him to Babylon. Didn't kill him, they blinded him. And so Judah and Benjamin wound up going to Babylon. I never did understand, I still don't understand why. And just 70 years in Babylon, when the Medo-Persian takes over and gives them an opportunity to come back to Israel, to Jerusalem, treats them good. I mean, he, in fact, gives them the wherewithal, the money, the gold, the timber, all that stuff to rebuild the city of Jerusalem and the temple. First king in history to do that to a captured people. How many came back when you start reading through Ezra and Nehemiah? How many came back to Jerusalem and to Israel? 45,000. Why wouldn't all of them come? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. Maybe I'm crazy. But out of all the countries I've ever been to in this world, this is it. Germany was nice, yeah. We enjoyed Germany. You know, you go down to the Alps and ski, you go to the guest house, and it's nice and friendly. But it's not America. You see, if you see the gendarme out in the middle of the street with his hand up, you better be stopped. You don't stop, what happens? They start shooting. Huh? There was a young man that I knew. He ran a pizzeria down in Nine Siedlerhof, which was about 10 clicks from Kaiserslautern. And he had he had a real good restaurant in all actuality. Only problem was he served alcoholic beverages. Across from his restaurant was a gypsy camp. Two guys and came in there, and you got to understand, if the bartender keeps on and you get drunk, you go out and kill somebody, you go out and have a car wreck, they hold the barkeeper also responsible in Germany. Two guys come in there and they want to drink, he refuses, they take him out in front of the guest and cut his throat right there in his guest house, and he dies. You know what the gendarme did? They set a water-cooled 30 on one end of the camp and set another one on the other end. The first two guys run, they shot. Packed up their 30 calibers and went home. We don't live in a place like that. We don't live in a place. Even though it was pretty and we enjoyed it, we just didn't want to stay there. And certainly didn't want to stay in Moscow. And certainly didn't want to stay in the Ukraine and, Romania and all them places. Why didn't they come back? Why didn't they come back? Because they didn't have temple worship in Babylon. All they had was synagogue. And the next folks that take over may not be as friendly to them as had been Cyrus. And so I have a problem understanding why they didn't, but they didn't. March that thing about the burning bush and God's presence on up till first century. What happened to the folks in the church in the first century? You're a Christian in a heathen Roman Empire. And they had to worship in secret, lots of places. What happened to the 12 apostles? One lives to die a natural death, John. The rest died hideously. And Luke was included in that, And he wasn't an apostle, but he was included. He was killed in his home country. Even after that, in our time, Christians, it's getting worse in our country about what they want us to be quiet and not do and all that kind of stuff. They want to put a preacher in jail for talking about homosexuality or the LBGTs. Okay? But certainly in the first century, you know how long it took for the Roman Empire to accept Christianity and the king to declare it to be a religion and the religion? Happened in 354. Constantine declares that Christianity is good. Leave them alone. Wow. That's how many years? Yeah. 320-some years from the time that Christ dies that it's now acceptable. Why? Why, with governments burning Bibles and declaring Christianity illegal, and folks having to go underground to worship, is the church still alive? God's in the midst. He says, wherever 2 or 3 are gathered together, there I will be. So he's here this morning in spirit. We're going to talk a little bit here just in a minute about I am. He always has been, always will be. He's here. And sometimes we lose sight of that. We lose that in our memory. We lose that in our thought process on Sunday morning, don't we? Sunday night and Wednesday night. And he says, I am your God, and I will be with you. God hears the cry of the Israelite children. And in verse 9, he says, now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel is come unto me. And I have also seen the oppression wherewith the Egyptians oppressed them. Come now, therefore, and I will send thee unto Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. Notice what Moses says. He said unto God, who am I that I should go unto Pharaoh and I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt. What? I can understand. What's he been doing? For 40 years, he's been married to Jochebed, not Jochebed, to Zipporah. Has 2 sons. Lives in Midian. He's watching the herds and the flocks of his father-in-law. And then his brother-in-law. He's 80 years old. And he says, who am I? God didn't say, look at him, Moses. I prepared you for what I'm going to ask you, what I'm telling you you're going to do. And he did. You go back and look at Moses' birth. He's born to 2 people from the tribe of Levi. His mother and his father are from the tribe of Levi. His mother is Jochebed, who is Kohath's sister, and his father is Amram, the son of Korath. And he marries his aunt, which makes her, Jochebed, Moses' great aunt. And we say, wow. You know, when I was growing up, when I was 6, 7 years old, when they were talking about great, they were talking about folks like me, old, you know. My great-grandfather, I remember, on my mother's side, his name was Kavod Griffith, and he was from Johnstown, Pennsylvania. He got his left arm cut off in a coal mine and couldn't be a coal miner anymore, so he came south and homesteaded some land over here on Church Road. Sold that to my granddaddy and went to Minnesota and homesteaded up there. Sold that, moved back here, and I remember him living with one of his daughters over on the Mars Hill Road. And he liked oysters. My mother would fix oysters, and I had to run them from up on the hill across the road over to their house for my great-grandfather. So Moses' mother is his great aunt. Hello? Anyway, he says, I prepared you. You are the son of two that are of the tribe of Levi. So now who is Moses' brother? Aaron, right? His sister is Miriam. And we don't find that out till, 6th chapter, roughly 20th verse. But he says, I prepared you. Who raised him? Well, first of all, his first 4 or 5 years, and that was the custom of the area at the time, a nanny kept them. Well, who was his nanny? His mother. Paid by Pharaoh's daughter to watch her own son for 4 or 5 years. And then Pharaoh's daughter takes him over. And he's raised in Pharaoh's house and educated. And he knows about Egypt. And he knows about pharaohs, and he knows about the country, and he knows of a lot of stuff that he learned in those 40 years in the palace of the king. Wow. And he also, his mother had to tell him and give him some good advice about how to live and educate him about who they were and who Abraham was, and all of these stories that came down through the ages in the patriarchal system. And what's his question? What's Moses' question? Who do I tell the children of Israel sent me? What does God answer? He says, you tell them that I am sent you. Say what? So he tells what his name is, I am, and about his characteristics, that I am. I am that I am. Notice he didn't say I was. Oh, he was there all the time. He was been there through eternity. And he still lives in eternity. We live in time. He lives in eternity. And he always has been. And he always will be. Notice he didn't say I will be down in the future. I am that I am. Wow. Hello. I can't imagine being Moses and being talked to by God. You know, what did the Israelites say to Moses when they were in Mount Horeb? When he comes down from the mountain? This is you talk to him. We don't want to talk to him. Huh? Who's the most powerful person you've ever been in contact with in your life? Individual that lives in this world. Who is the most powerful that you have ever been around? And who is the most powerful you had to tell something to? I never will forget Chief of Staff of the Army, 4-star general. His habit was he'd let you start out, if you were the senior guy, he'd let you start out with the briefing. When he got to the point that he's doubting what you're saying, he'd have you sit down and somebody else get up and start. And when they ran out of steam, he got somebody else up. But the most unique thing about that man was that if you ever told him something and it hadn't changed in 10 years, you better not tell him something different. Because he had one of those minds that remembered everything, I guess. But you better tell him. That's God, isn't it? To the 10th power. That's God. He knows everything that's ever. He made it. He spoke it into existence. He spoke us. Wow. He made us in his image. And here's Moses, 80 years old, and he says, who do I say sent me? That's a good question, really. It's a good question for an 80-year-old guy to ask God, who hadn't talked to him before that. Can you imagine going 80 years and he don't talk to you? All of a sudden he wants you to go rescue 2.5 million people and drag them out of Egypt, away from the Pharaoh. Hello? He's always there. He's always current in any time and any age. It's always I am. And it's so close to the bell ringing again. I'm not going to go into but you're familiar with, and we'll talk about this next week, about Jesus using the term I am. And he does that on about 9 different occasions in the New Testament. We'll look at that next week. Thank you for your attention.